you never know what the behind the scenes is. And so you never know. Right now, those builders are feeling it more than they ever have. And really, they're coming off of a really high market where those agents, did they have to be unique to be able to sell those? They had to be efficient through the process, but did they have to think outside of the box to be able to actually get these listings max exposure? No, probably not really.
Welcome back to Realestatable, your go-to podcast for raw, real, and relevant information in the real estate world. Today, we are talking all about new construction.
And we're going to break it all down, go through the process and how you can successfully have the conversation with your buyers. We're going to also dive into you having possible listing opportunities with builders, really start to finish, everything you need to know about new construction.
Yeah, so give it a listen. All right, so let's dive in, and we're going to start with talking about the timeline of new construction. So nothing is worse than pulling up to a house that you're going to show that's new construction, says it's going to be complete in 2 weeks, a month, and showing up with your buyer and there's nothing there, because that has literally happened to me
The worst
before, and you feel like an idiot.
Well, especially right now because you're showing so many more properties, like doing the homework ahead of time to know whether or not these builders who, before they were just busting through the process. They were, building as quick as they could and selling as quick as they could. But now not so much. So, something that's in the MLS to start with may not actually have a start and completion date as advertised, and agents not necessarily keeping up with that. So, doing the homework ahead of time, making sure that you're making the phone calls, doing the drive-by of the area to make sure that you are checking to see, do I actually have something that I can sell in a timeline that works with buyers?
Well, I also think that with new construction, you kind of take that gamble of like, it's already hard enough to find a new construction home because it's not in your GPS. So you're like driving around looking for these lot numbers, and then to find out that the house isn't even there or isn't started makes it 10 times harder. I mean, I try to tell my clients, hey, if you see me turn around, it's just because we're trying to find this lot number. If I haven't had a chance to drive through the neighborhood and kind of scope it out and learn where I'm going. But like I said, I did have a client one time come into town from out of town and was like, we want to see these 10 houses. And I pulled up and there was literally nothing there. I'm like, well, on to the next. Sorry, guys. I don't know what happened there, but
has nothing to do with her driving. If you have to circle the block 6 times,
yeah,
it's not an Ashlee problem. It's the builder problem.
Yeah, the builder better figure it out.
It looks like that, especially when it's like your first interaction with buyers. It's like, I know what I'm doing. I'm the pro here.
Well, we just drove around new construction before this episode, and you were saying too, like the foreman was talking about people just not wanting to show up right now, not like contractors and people not wanting to come out and just do their part of the construction process. So I feel like now more than ever, because it's not a fast moving market, you have to check the progress of these new constructions because who knows where they're at.
Yeah, I agree. And that brings us kind of into the, like, how do you communicate to a buyer how long the process is going to take? So there's all kinds of things as far as supply delay, labor delays, etc. So how are you setting up your buyers for realistic expectations? If they have a hard deadline for closing and occupancy, if there is something that is controlling a no plan B kind of conversation with closing, it may not be the right choice for your buyer. So make sure when you're looking and considering the new construction, if we don't have a controllable environment, setting them up for realistic expectations with that. I think that has been the conversation for the last couple of years. Delays in product and supply and labor, delay, all of those things being delayed absolutely is not new news, but I don't think it's something that you don't need to be considering now, moving out of a very heavy demand market at all.
Well, I also think about the weather, because that is so hard to predict, and that can put a huge delay, especially, well, for where we're from in Tennessee. I mean, if you get ice or there's a chance of snow, your whole town is shut down. So thinking about that, thinking about the rain that happens in the spring and the fall could be delays in the build because the drywall mud doesn't dry as fast, or you can't put the drywall in because it's raining and things like that. So just taking those things into consideration when you're talking through, with your client on that.
Well, in one of the ways you can avoid that, so I have a client that does have a deadline. Like there is a drop dead time frame that they have to be here. The military is moving them. The stuff is coming. They don't have a plan B, etc. We have a good buffer of timeline in order for them to be finished. In this instance, this house is going to be done prior to closing. This is going to be done prior to them arriving. But we chose a lot that we had a big enough buffer if stuff was happening, and there has been delays and we have eaten into that, but not enough where it has bumped the closing. So when you're considering that and considering options, you're going to have to do a little bit more legwork than you normally would be doing. And we're going to talk about great reward of why you would consider this. But making sure that you're considering all of those things and then having a realistic conversation. Because I know I've had buyers, I know plenty of us have had buyers that they're like, I only want to look at new construction. Okay, great. How can we be successful in achieving your goals in the timeline, et cetera? That is the legwork that we need to be doing up front. We have plenty of options to be showing them, but let's only work through the options that actually would be realistic for their timeline.
I also think collaborating with the listing agent just to see, hey, where are you at on lot 1 in this neighborhood? How are you accurate on the completion date? Are the cabinets installed? Are the flooring? Just trying to figure out where you're at in the new construction process to give you a better idea. Okay, this house is not going to be ready for a home inspection at this time. This house is not going to be ready for you when you're needing to be living in the house. So ruling that out just by talking to the agent, because we all know that an agent may not update the MLS of when the house is actually going to be done, versus where it's actually at in the process.
So we're working through right now. One of our newer agents has her first like dirt to completion buyer. They're looking in a neighborhood that's not even started, so there's not even other lots to go off of for completed units, etc. And as I'm talking through with her in the last couple of weeks, just talking through the intricacies of that whole process, it has been super crystal clear to me that if you are a solo agent going in on this alone, you're not setting yourself up for success. So having the enough hindsight to go, okay, I have a baby brand new construction neighborhood situation. I need to partner with someone that is going to help me advise correctly through that process. Would heavily advise that you are seeking some type of partnership for that first, second, third time of new construction. The other thing that I've had having conversations with her on is every process is different, and so until you have done dozens of these with different builders, and even those builders change their processes over time, these things are going to change. And so making sure that you're over researching, over educating, becoming that listing agent's best friend to get all of the questions answered through that process, you need to be doing so much more legwork so that you remain the pro in this transaction through the process with your buyers.
I love how you said every process is different, every transaction is different, because I feel like that phrase as a realtor is your best friend. Because if you don't know the answer, that kind of gives you your buffer of being able to find out, oh, you know what? Every process is different. Let me check with the listing agent. Okay. It doesn't say that you don't know the answer, but it's saying that, hey, I'm going to go find out the answer.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's just like a more professional way. Like, oh, every process is different. Let me check how they do it.
Well, it's the truth though too. So,
Yeah.
but wanting to be able to be the pro and be that person of resource and reference for your buyer, having that enough of that up front to know, okay, I feel like we're setting ourselves up for success, but knowing you're going to have to continue through that process of that communication, getting answers, pivoting as you need to, and making sure you have the flexibility conversation with your buyer continuously. Things are not going to go as perfectly planned. These are humans that are building these buildings, these houses. This is a not a foolproof system, and having the flexibility that one thing's going to go wrong, 10 things are going to go wrong. Things are going to go wrong, and that needs to be okay with you, to navigate through this process. I think one of the biggest things for success of communication through, okay, we've gone through the whole process, we're under contract, we're navigating towards closing, is in making sure that you're doing property checks for your buyer. So you want to
Mhm.
talk a little bit about what that looks like, how often.
Well, so we have a lot of people relocating here. So a lot of our buyers are not local. If you do have a local buyer, you can probably guarantee that they are going out to the property checking. Not saying you shouldn't go check, but I think it's more important, if your buyer is out of town and relocating, to go check on that property. So if we're starting, ground to finish, it's going to vary throughout the process. So, you're going to go check and make sure that the land is cleared. If you're starting from day one, okay, here's my lot. The land is being cleared. You're going to check when the footers are poured. You're going to check when the foundation is put in. So there's different times. And I think that as the changes that are more visual, so the footers and like installing of like the plumbing, those are big items where you can go and say, okay, the plumbing is in, the electric is in, the drywall is in. So it's like things that they can see are going to be the most important things to your buyers, like moving throughout the process. They
Mhm.
want to know what's happening. Okay, well, we're in drywall now. The next thing is paint. The next thing is the flooring. This is, just kind of going through the process, because I think that especially people who have not built before, who don't know the process, just want to be informed. Like, hey, okay, it's taking forever for my house to be built. What is taking so long? Well, actually, you're on track because you have A, B, and C done, and next week they're going to be putting the cabinets in. So that way you kind of give your people the warm fuzzies of like, okay, my house is being built. It doesn't look like it's just a pile of dirt right now.
Well, and I think too, when you're talking about timeline, because some of these build processes are a year. So
Yeah.
you'll sit for 30 days and you're like, why have we not broke ground? Well, the permitting process, the clearing the
Mhm.
land, getting all of the things ordered, the subcontractors lined up, everyone's scheduled, all of those things are happening. So if you are getting questions and you're feeling like, okay, I need backup to having the conversation, feel free to call the listing agent and just say, hey, what has been done so far? And how far are we looking for the next visual thing to be done? I think that when you're talking through that, you're saying, like, okay, it depends on how often that I'm checking the property. In the very beginning, less visual things are happening
Mhm.
and more behind the scenes and setting up, the next step. But then after a while, going every week, every 7 to 10 days is very realistic to think that that should be how often your boots on the ground at the property. Whether or not your buyer is here, whether or not they're visiting the property with you, it's your responsibility to make sure that that ball is moving. And if it hasn't been moving, you're 2 to 3 checks in and it's like, okay, I am not seeing where is the progress, what is happening, checking in with that agent and going, okay, it's been a couple weeks, been out to the property a couple times, and what is happening? They're able to help lend the information where you might not see. I know we were delayed on some electrical stuff and you couldn't tell like the behind the scenes part of that, but we weren't really delayed. We were just doing a lot of things that were not visually seen
Noticeable.
during,
Yeah.
yeah, during, like, it wasn't visible, it wasn't seen during those property checks. So I think that the more often that you're out there, I don't think there's ever you're out there too much. You might be not seeing anything, but not too much, as far as that goes too. And you want to make sure that you're staying within the guidelines of your contract
Mhm.
for the amount of times you can be visiting the property, and also educating your buyer with the guidelines of visits to property as well. There usually is in new construction contracts information that says this is the outline of how often you can be there, the hours you can be there, who needs to be there with you. Make sure that that is being followed, as you as the agent and for the buyer as well.
Yeah, and I would just make sure your buyer knows and understands that, because even though you may tell them one time, hey, you're not allowed to go, to the property between 7 and 5, um, but you have to be accompanied by me. Just try to make sure that you let them know, like, you are in a legally binding
Mhm.
contract that you have signed, and you have agreed to only visit the property during the times that are in this contract. So just letting them know, like, this is a legal binding contract.
Well, and I think too, the other thing is you got to do a little bit of the prep work with that
Mhm.
too. So they're naturally going to want to be there. If they're here in town, they're going to want to be there. You need to be going, okay, when would you like to schedule? For this month, I'm pre-scheduling my visits to the property. We're going to visit 3 times, and here is, my availability. Here's when I'm not available, etc. pre-schedule that so that they know those are their times to be there. If you don't have to be there during the property visits, I would let them know, hey, before you head out there, can you just let me know? So that way, if I'm asked, I know that you're on the property and I can kind of vouch for you. So
Mhm.
again, go back to your contracts, make sure that that is being um, is spoke about through the process, because they all of a sudden kind of sort of forget. I don't know how
Yeah.
what you signed,
But it happens.
what you're bound by, et cetera. Sometimes they need some gentle reminders with the cattle prod
Yeah.
through that. So
I would also say property checks are really important too, just to make sure that the right products are being installed. So even if you're not building a custom home with like everything in it, you still want to make sure that the right flooring that your client signed up for, or the floor plan that they're doing, the paint colors, the knobs, the lighting, all of the things are what your client wanted. Because if you have happy clients, that's going to be that's the end goal of every transaction. You want your happy clients, but you want to make sure that they're getting the product that they want. So catching it earlier than later is always better. So just making sure, if you bring like their selection sheet, or what the builder has that they have already maybe pre-selected, bringing that with you and being like, okay, the brush nickel is here, this is good, the carpet's the right color. Because nothing's worse than being like weeks out, or like a week from closing, and they're like, hey, wait, this isn't the right flooring. Well, there's nothing we can do about that now. And
yeah.
then your client's unhappy and the builder's mad and all the thing. It's just not good.
Well, and I also think that too, you catching this versus your buyer catching this is
Mm-hmm.
you remaining the pro through this. You catching this before and addressing it with the builder, having a solution before you present that to the buyer, you remain the pro. So I think that that all kind of goes along with like the things you can control in a uncontrollable type of scenario. You need to stick with that. That's your game plan. That's your steps to success as far as that goes. Well, anything else as far as like timelines, anything? I know it's everyone is so different. So you're going to have to really, really lean into, those that have experience. Every region is going to be different. Every state is going to be different. I think that for an overview, though, that covered pretty much a step by step on success as far as timeline and working that with buyers.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, I mean, new construction is a good choice right now for buyers,
Yeah.
because, in the COVID market, builders were building houses, slamming them out, bam, bam, bam. And not, the marketing didn't have to be great and all the things, but now it's a different market. And I think that builders are offering things that, like incentives, closing cost incentives, rate buy downs, things that maybe a traditional seller might not be offering. And it helps them kind of stand out, even though new construction is that like shiny new option. But it's nice that builders are offering those incentives.
Yeah, I think you're going to see it more. And I think it lends into your buyers having more options.
Mhm.
They're going to be intrigued by that as well. So let's dive into contracts and just setting this up for success before you even get to a timeline. Yes, you need to be communicating the correct timeline, the flexibility conversation, etc. But writing a new construction contract can seem really overwhelming. And I know for us in our region that we're in, we're dual licensed in Tennessee and Kentucky, but not only that, we're in different markets in a very large range of mileage that we can serve. We can serve effectively because we have an MLS that covers a large region, but there is so many
Mhm.
differences when it comes to new construction and contracts. You want to start to kind of talk on what to expect as far as normal versus not normal versus builders and
Um, well, I mean, I personally love writing a new construction contract on for us, like the Tennessee form. I prefer that over writing a contract on a builder's contract. You get some of these big builder names who have their own contract. And so I think it's just really important to make sure before you even fill it out, before um anyone fills it out, because sometimes the builder's listing agent will be filling that portion out for you. Just asking, hey, can I have a copy of a blank copy of this so I can read through it? And then making sure that you're scrubbing through that contract and knowing it. If you don't know what something means, ask your broker, compare it to your regular form, because there will be differences, and it is I don't want to say to benefit the builder, but it kind of does when you're looking at the contract. It's more so backing the builder versus a regular contract is a little more neutral or maybe more so even in the buyer's favor.
Mhm.
But just knowing that, just reading it through and reading everything that you're filling out when you have a builder contract versus your own.
Yeah, and I think that that is a scary thing too when you have a builder's agent that's like, "Well, I'll send this over
Mhm.
to your buyers to sign. I'll complete this for them." Making sure you're doing due diligence because I know some of those builders agents that come into our market where the builders we represent in our actual town that we are residing in, there's no builder contract. So they come here and they're like, "Hey, here's the easy button. Here's my buyer, do everything." And we're like, "No, no, no, you actually write the
Mhm.
contract, you actually write the offer." It's kind of a mind explosion for them because there's no easy button. I think that there, regardless, when you're representing someone, there's no easy button across the board. Whether or not someone else is doing the completing of that, what Ashlee just suggested is an absolute must across any type of contracts as far as that goes. The other thing too is talking through that process because if you have kind of babied up your buyer into, this mama bear kind of status where it's like, "Hey, I'm going to be advising and protecting you in the bounds of what I'm capable of doing." If all of a sudden they're speaking with a builder's agent or sitting down in a model home and going through a contract, and you need to be preparing them for that, preparing them to say, "Hey, you are able to seek legal advisement to go through any contract, whether it's a state form, whether it's new construction or not. You are able to have additional advisement prior or more so than what I'm even doing." And this is one of those cases that you got to kind of have to be setting them up for success as far as that goes.
I remember my first time going with my buyer to a model home. We walked a bunch of different floor plans with the builder's agent who was kind of on staff at that model home. And they decided, okay, we want to make an offer on, whatever house. They're first time home buyers. I mean, I didn't tell them this, but this was my first time doing a deal like this. I was literally so nervous. I'm like, oh my gosh, what does this contract say? Is this lady trying to steal my client? Am I even involved anymore? So just making sure that you are being that strong person in the situation of like, okay, hold on. Like before you look at this contract, before we go over any details, I need to read a blank one. I need to
Mhm.
figure out, I want a blank copy in front of me while you're filling this out. So I can go line by line and be like, okay, I'm tracking where you're at in this contract because I know for me, I was super nervous. I was a new agent at the time and I had never done anything like that. And I was just like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Help.
Well, and it's like you a lot of times those contracts are fine. They're
Mhm.
just there's just spoken in a different type of language or they're clear on what they're outlining. It's not like they're trying to do one over on the buyers, but it's like, "Hey, you're putting down a non-refundable deposit, which means even a contingency does not allow for
Mhm.
this money to come back." Or, "Hey, this timeline is flexible by," they're telling you, 150 days. Are you reading that? There is a little bit more of the due diligence that has to happen with this whole process, even when it is a state or a regular form, because those builders are building things in to help benefit them through that process because of the flexibility that's needed with new construction.
Mhm.
So talking through that, even a experienced buyer, even a buyer who has bought new construction before, every scenario is different truly, and you really have to be doing due diligence across the board as far as that goes.
I would even recommend too, if you're in that situation, maybe just tell if your buyer is unsure and if maybe you're unsure, hey, let's sleep on it. Let's fill this out. Let's read it over. I work with a lot of first time home buyers. So like a lot of parents get involved. Talk over with your parents. Do you think they think it's a good idea? Because they value those opinions as well. So I think not have just knowing that you don't have to rush into any kind of contract and just reading through it and making sure you understand and making sure your client understands that will have a happy transaction.
Well, and the other thing too, I was going to add to that too, like the non-rushing, the sleeping on it, that kind of scenario, reminding them too, a lot of if the scenario that Ashlee just talked about, where you're walking around a new construction model home, that kind of situation, those agents are salespeople.
Mm-hmm.
they're not looking out for they are trying to sell these houses. They're not looking out for the intricacies that you should as a buyer's agent. So keeping that in mind, and again, prepping and educating your buyer ahead of time that okay, you're going to be shown the shiny pretty all the things, and that there's going to be a lot of sales talk, but we still have to back it up, take our time, making sure that the contract that we're getting into is something you're comfortable with to proceed with. Super good points. What do you think about builders preferred lenders?
Not a fan.
0 out of 10. Recommend.
I was gonna say, 'cause,
0 out of 10.
I have my own preferred lenders, and I think that, you know, the builder has their preferred lenders for a reason. You know, they may be getting a deal or, you know,
Some kickback or
yeah,
something.
something. Whereas the lenders that I'm providing, I've worked with before. I've had good relationships, good transactions with. They may have good promotions or interest rates, things like that, where I get nothing from recommending, anybody to a lender versus, I'm just trying to keep my buyer and get them the best deal versus a builder's lender. Who knows? Like, who
Well,
knows what
in
that
some of
relationship is?
these big companies too, the lenders are owned by the builder company as well.
Mm.
So just be buyer beware on that. It's super difficult, in our market where you have builders that will only give incentives if these lenders are used. So being mindful of that is like, okay, if there's incentives that are to be had, are those just are you giving them freely, or are those strings attached? Is
Yeah.
it, or do we have to use certain companies and certain things in order for us to be benefiting from that? Or is there truly the benefit of, hey, this is the incentive, and it really, you could use the lender. It's super great. He'll offer, an additional something. But looking through and researching all of those things that you can clearly communicate that, and you're not being sold to along with your buyer. So just be super mindful of that. Don't have any proof that anything behind the scenes is going down, but man, when it's like, here's the incentive, but only if you're going to this one side, it's difficult to not think that there would be some type of something being thrown back at that buyer for a benefit of using them.
Well, I also think maybe talk to that lender and see, hey, what is the benefit if my buyer uses you? Oh, you're going to offer this or that? Okay, let's talk to my preferred lender. Hey, can you match that? Can you do this? Because you never know. They might be able to do whatever this builder's lender is doing, but you have someone that you can call or text on the weekend, not an 800 number, not Joe Schmo who works at ABC Bank. Um, you have your trusted contact, and I think that that's worth its weight in gold versus whatever incentive.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So that's another part of which luckily, not every market has that. Not every market has the contracts that we're talking about, but just in general, there are going to be different things that are going to be happening through the process with the offers in the negotiations, et cetera. So making sure that you're partnering with a company, with a broker that has knowledge base and experience, partnering with another agent, getting yourself through as much training as you can, so when those buyers come and sit, in front of you, you have some basis of knowledge to work from, for sure. For sure.
I think another thing to note with buyers is 9 times out of 10, they're not building a custom home. So just differentiating a custom home versus like a spec home to a
With some
builder
options.
with some
With some,
options.
some options. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a couple people where they're like, well, "We're building a custom home," and I'm like, "But," I mean, in a nice way, my brain, I'm like, 2 doors down is the same house, just different colors. And I don't mean that to be mean, but that's just kind of how it is. And like, if you look at certain neighborhoods, it's like, okay, you have floor plan A, B, C, D, and then they repeat those same floor plans, and it might be different colors or whatever. But just kind of letting them know, hey, this isn't a custom floor plan. You didn't design the room dimensions and all of that. And just kind of let them know, I think one shock is upgrades. When you're talking with your buyer, letting them know that most things that are considered upgrades are costs that are going to be out of pocket to the buyer and not something that's rolled into the loan. Because I think a lot of buyers think, okay, we're building our custom home, regardless of what it is. We want to put what we want in there, but most people are like, maybe don't have the cash saved up, and that might be something that they may have to install later based on what they have.
Well, and I think that's going to be different for every market too, where, there might be different markets where appraisers, and that is a normal where upgrades and different packages will appraise at different amounts, etc. But I'm gonna guess the majority of those that are listening right now, that is not the case. But I think again, it's educating yourself to know, okay, if we're making selections, is every single option that we're making selections for countertops, are all of those that are options going to be included? Or are there going to be options shown that is going to be cost out of pocket? Or is that going to be an increase in price? Or is that going to be, a different direction that I need to prepare my buyers for? And when I say prepare, that is upfront before they are committed to a legally binding contract. I've had times, in a slower market where I'm like, we need to do selections ahead of us even doing a contract. We need to go see a showroom.
Mhm.
We need to go see these vendors. We need to talk through, because if you're going to give me one option for countertops that is included, but every other one is going to be $10,000 out of pocket, that buyer needs to know, or there needs to be a contingency that allows your buyer to be able to back out based off of a lack of selection or the cost of selections. Not something that you want to find out after they're bound and already, locked into something, usually with some non-refundable builder deposits, etc.
Mhm.
Not something you want to find out then.
Yeah, I agree on that.
I think that wraps up a lot of like the buyer side of this. We want to dive in super heavy into the listing side of this, and see if there is some listing opportunities for you guys around the country, if you have considered all options, and talking through that as well.
So I'm going to ask you, Tiffany, because you do represent a builder in town and you have for quite a few years. How did you get started working with a builder?
Okay, so for my exact experience, it's a good point to bring this up. And we're going to talk through some different things that you could be doing. But for my particular experience, I asked for a chance. I was like, I don't want a commitment. I want a chance.
Mhm.
I want to see if what I can bring to the table and what I can offer, which we speak about our, unique value and how we do things differently. I wanted a chance to be able to bring that to the building side of things. The other thing is like choosing who to partner with. I would not partner with every builder that is an option. I would not be asking for a chance with every builder in our market. It was kind of strategic in a place of mutual respect. There's a lot of things that will happen through the process, and I think building is a high stress environment, and builders act differently than some other professionals. And so I think that for me, it was, there's a huge bucket, a huge sea of options, and mine that I would actually be willing to take a chance with was a very small amount. So the person that I was like, okay, I want to kind of expand, I want to see, if there's options, I literally just had the conversation. Would you take a chance? And when I look at this, and I want you guys to be mindful of this as well, you have builders that are represented clients. So those are represented sellers. And so when I ask about a chance, I heard through the grapevine about a new subdivision that was not already listed with an agent. So if I was going, okay, I want to go down to Long River subdivision that has 6 agents representing a builder, I would not go to that builder and say, hey, give me a chance for Long River subdivision. I'm going down and I'm saying, hey, I see that Short River is about to be, you're breaking ground, you're about to be doing something, and the likelihood of there being representation there is super unlikely. So I would talk in a place of non-representation or future representation. If you were ever looking for the opportunity to try something new, if you were ever looking for someone for future subdivisions, etc., I love for you to take the chance, to see what makes us different, to see what is going to um, be a possibility of a good partnership. So that would be my 2 pointers on that.
What
Was
would
the question?
what would you say though for the listeners that if you see, a subdivision that has somebody sign in the yard and you're like, "Hey, I know that Susie Q represents Bob the builder all the time." Would you still try, like you said, to take a chance on the smaller subdivision even though they have that relationship? You think
Absolutely.
so?
That's what I did. So that the builder at the time had previous relationships. I didn't know whether she was doing a great job, not a, a terrible job, etc. I knew that she had other listings with him, and had for years. But I was you never know what the behind the scenes is. And so you never know. Right now, those builders are feeling it more than they ever have. And really, they're coming off of a really high market where those agents, did they have to be unique to be able to sell those? They had to be efficient through the process, but did they have to think outside of the box to be able to actually get these listings max exposure? No, probably not really. So I don't think, because the reality is like how many brand new builders are going to take a chance on a brand new, and not saying brand new in the business, but never have represented a new construction builder before. It's going to have to be an existing builder
Mhm.
that has experience and is just wanting to try something new.
Mhm.
But you have to be super mindful because those are represented clients. So how you're having that conversation is going to be different with every state law. Super heavy broker advisement. Know what you need to be saying and doing in order to make sure that you're not crossing any lines, state to state. So that's kind of how, when you're looking at it, if we're talking about this, these are existing builders that have worked with agents over the years. And you're going to start to have the scary conversations.
I would I would say another way to get in with the builder is being on the opposite side. So if
Mhm.
you're consistently bringing buyers to, if you're selling the builder's listings by bringing buyers, that's a good way to get in and say, "Hey, you know what? I've sold 3 of your listings. Would you consider giving me a chance maybe at one of your listings? I think that I can present and provide A, B, and C qualities, and be able to sell your listings, on the opposite side and represent you."
And that gives you a good chance too to know, like, would you want to be part of that
Mhm.
process? Because I think that you will hear about reputation about builders. You can certainly Google reviews. You can see what your clients are saying about these houses afterwards, and you can hear through the grapevine, etc. But to really know about the ins and outs of the process, representing on the buyer side is really going to be like, hey, man, I could make this process better. I feel like I'm being respected through this process. I feel like there is some growth to be had and some stuff that I could bring to the table, but it's not something that I wouldn't want to put my name to, scenario.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you had a train wreck of a transaction for 3 times, definitely don't ask to work for that builder because you already know how the other side is,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And I mean that energy that you're bringing into your business, you want to make sure that you're protecting that scenario too. Another good way for you to be considering that too is to be hosting open houses for these builders agents. So again, every state is going to be different as far as the legalities of holding another agent's house open. But that would be one of the things to consider, is, do you have the opportunity? I know that most builder agents, one, don't want to be sitting in open houses, and two, don't have the ability to be in all of the inventory right now. There is inventory that is being completed and is sitting there prior to it selling. So having that be another one of your ends, talking with those agents, and then just the visibility of, okay, Ashley's out there again at Long River Subdivision. She's listing, or she's sitting in another one of our listings. Well, this is the 10th weekend now. I think that's probably going to catch the eye and the attention of a builder, but you're not crossing those lines of represented clients. So that is a really good point and a good place to be right now, looking for
yeah.
buyers.
Yeah, I know before we've talked about, I don't know if it's been on the podcast or if it's just been in like one of the classes we've done, but sitting in a new construction neighborhood, just working in your car, or I know my neighborhood, they're still building houses. So like anytime I go on a walk and I'm walking back by the new construction, I carry business cards because 9 times out of 10, you can find someone who's just like driving slow, doing like the creeper drive, and you're like, hey, do you want to see this house? Or like just give them your card. Hey, I'm an agent who lives in this neighborhood. I'd love to show you this house when it's a good time for you.
Yeah, and I think that is the visual of those builder and foremen,
Hmm.
are, if they're seeing you consistently being back there, they're gonna be like, okay,
Who's this crazy chick?
who is loitering in our subdivision? So I think that that's probably going to catch the eye as well. So it's kind of just what gives the intention to have that ask of taking the chance. I think that all of those things can be great. Another thing to consider too is if you're in a market where you only have new construction, model homes and companies, and the business relationship is so locked tight where you don't have individual builders that are listing with individual agents, this might not even be an opportunity without you actually moving to a company to be employed by the real estate company that is actually running a model home, a community, a subdivision. We understand that not every market is the same as what we're referring to. So this may not be a conversation that you can actually have without really uprooting and reshifting the focus of your business. More so talking about those builders that are, I know our builders in town, most of them do not have exclusive relationships with one listing agent. They're listing with 2 to 3 to 5 to 10 agents. And not very many model homes unless it's an agent produced scenario where they're essentially staging out one of their listings and deeming it to be a model home. Completely different market.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so let's talk further on that. So you work for the builder now. At what point are you listing the new construction in MLS? Are you putting it when it's dirt? Are you putting it when it's framed? When have you and your builder talked about listing the house?
Yeah, and that's going to be a builder conversation. And I'm super thankful that the partnership that I have a lot of influence in the success plan. But I also think I have proven myself. Giving a chance has proven to be super lucrative even before the COVID market. And so he trusts my opinion in the market and what we should be doing and strategizing next. And so for us, and this is shifting, I will say that we are having to shift sales now. But for us, in helping control quality, timeline, and outcome, we try to wait as long as possible to list properties, as long as possible. And so in the COVID market, we waited to the 30-day window of completion because we knew, 30 days plus a 30-day of delay, we could control that quality. Um, Not as easily navigated now when you have properties that are not selling in that 30-day timeline. But I think that that is a conversation that you're going to have with the builder because I know for us, we have kind of kicked back through drywall.
Mhm.
I do think another thing that affects the return as far as how a subdivision is performing is how much inventory is on the market. So we have strategized and are strategic in making sure that even if we have some properties that are completed or should be listed, et cetera, that we're not super heavy on too many listings and too many options available. So think about like the scarcity mindset that if you have too many options, people are almost overwhelmed in making a decision, but they also think that they have more negotiating power.
Mhm.
So keep all of that stuff in mind. But really, the reality of it is your builder is your seller, which is your represented client. That you should have some influence in that relationship, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can control and say, oh, we're not listing. It has to be a certificate of occupancy before we're listed.
Mhm.
Builders don't have the freedom. You have to have the balance of being able to keep them in business, keep the sales rolling, and kind of control the quality out of that whole process as well.
Well, I think too, like with buyers, if you list it too early and the house has been on the market for 150 days, buyers think they have more negotiating power. Oh, well, this house is sitting. Well, they listed this house when it was being drywalled. It's not,
Yeah.
it's because
Or
it wasn't complete.
it was dirt for 6 months. It
Yeah,
wasn't, yeah.
exactly. So I think that strategically listing the house when it's 30 days out or maybe even 60 days out, where one, you have something to take a picture of and you're not just always using sample photos, because I feel like builders agents get in the habit of using the sample photos. And then that's when you pull up to the house and it's dirt.
Yes.
Because I sell a lot of new construction. So I feel like I'm on the flip side of you almost, where I'm on the buyer side and I hate pulling up and it's not where it says it's supposed to be. So I think that, just having the less days on market, the less inventory in the neighborhood, like you said, creates that scarcity mindset where they're like, "Ooh, I have to have one. I
Yeah.
have to have this one because
Yep.
they're selling out," Not in a bad way, but it's what works too.
Yeah. And I think too, when you're talking through like just strategizing through the entire plan, you need to be flexible that what's working now, what has worked in
Mhm.
the past, you're going to have to kind of remain the pro for your client. So shifting that your builder, who is a shoulder to shoulder professional, probably has decades, if not years of experience ahead of you in new construction and the listing process with new construction. You still need to make sure that you're remaining a pro and talking through different strategies through that process as well.
Okay, so let's talk about we're talking about timeline. How often are you taking pictures of the property? Are you just doing like completion photos? Are you doing progress? And are they professional or cell phone?
So I think that like looking, the particular builder that I'm representing now does have another agent that some of the projects, there is another agent that lists in that subdivision who uses the sample photography more times than I can count. And I can tell you, when the builder's coming to me, he'll say, "Man, your phone is ringing so much more than so and so." And I cannot think but think that that has to do with the photography. And so I am spending way more money on professional photography all day long, 100% of the time. I don't care until you're completely broke and dead in the grave. Professional photography. I'm not using cell phone photography for anything besides social media.
Mhm.
And that is just for in a more casual approach to exposure for these properties. So, partnering with a company that has a lesser price for progress photos and doing that often.
Mhm.
Right now, we are not listing until we are through drywall. Sometimes that means cabinets as well. And so I'm trying to hit different points of drywall and cabinets. Okay, countertops. Okay, floors. Okay, completed. I probably would say, depending on when you're listing, re-photographing 4 to 5 times, readjusting timeline, on an almost biweekly basis is par for course right now. And yes, it is costing us more money to be in business right now, but welcome to the reality
Mhm.
of where we're shifting. Everything is costing more money. But I think that is what I today had a conversation with my builder. Man, you're getting 2 to 3 times the phone calls that the other agent is getting. Okay, well, no duh. Like, no
Yeah.
duh. I'm actually presenting reality. And I also feel like when I have agents that have done business with me prior, and when I have agents who have closed, over the years, they know what to expect and they know that they can come to a box of success. And so I'll have agents now who will say, "Hey, Tiff, where do you have properties listed for sale? I have a buyer coming 300 and less. I want to work with you." Like, I know I can be set up for success. I can be touted through the process. I know that I have something I can actually work with. And that is like falling into my lap, kind of like buyers would.
Mhm.
So it's just things that are worth it. It's worth it to do the extra little bit with photography, to pay for it to be professional. I mean, 20 times. That's the answer. 20 times. If
Yeah.
you're photographing dirt, if you're photographing the foundation, how many ever times through that process to continue to update? We probably don't go more than 3 weeks without new photos
Mhm.
of the property.
Well, and as a buyer's agent, I feel like I really appreciate that. Just knowing the progress. And then also, it gives your buyers a chance to see professional photography too. So when I'm going out and doing my weekly checks and sending them my cell phone pictures of updates, they can also see, okay, here's the professional, pretty lighting, all of the things. Do you have anything else on the listing side you want to add? I feel like we hit a lot of the.
No, I think that the biggest thing is just kind of setting up a standard and not wavering from that,
Mhm.
because it is difficult. And I think we talk about this in all realms of our business where you are in a you're hearing heavy noise about cutting back, cutting back, cutting back. And I think that if you're going to stay afloat through this process, pushing forward and doing more is your key to success. New construction, absolutely 100%, but really across the board. You're
Mhm.
going to have to do more to be able to stay in real estate. And so that would be just kind of my charge to the new construction, is that continuing to do above and beyond, to continue to prove yourself is going to return results, not only for you, but then obviously, whoever you're partnering with.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, that's everything we have for you this week. Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next week. All right. I feel like we talked new construction to death. Like, I feel like
To the
everything,
ground.
yes, from start to finish. What would you say your biggest takeaway is, or what's the next thing you're going to do after listening to this episode?
I'm going to update my timelines in MLS because I was like, wait a minute. Ashley totally ragged on the timelines on MLS. And I'm like, I probably have to have a more consistent effort. Updating photos, no problem. That's my jam. But really, have I updated timelines? Because I know builders right now are focusing on those that are under contract and maybe pulling back the original timelines on others that are not under contract. So noted, right, writing my
You're
notes
welcome.
on that for sure. But what would you say as far as there's so many great points, but what would you say would be your biggest
I think just taking the chance was like my biggest takeaway where I'm like, I've talked to you 100 times where I'm like, I do want to try to list for a builder. I know I have what it takes. I know I've sold enough new construction to kind of know what I'm doing. But just not, I'm just like nervous to take the leap. And I think that just like hearing your story and being like, okay, that's kind of what you did. I could do that. I
Yeah,
could do that.
and I think too, you can even say like, I just need one.
Yeah.
Just let me have one. Because if you're only focused on one listing, you're going to be doing way more than those agents that are doing, trying to focus on 25 listings. So it's too easy. And what can they say? They can say no, just like every seller, every
Hmm.
buyer, every follow up, every, prospecting that you do, they could just say no. But I also think that it catches their attention. It's a touch and the universe is probably going to gravitate some energy towards you where they're going to start to see, okay, wait, there is a difference. Making sure that everything that they can be exposed to is max potential.
Yeah. All right, guys, you can find us everywhere on social. I would love to hear if you work for a builder, if you are constantly selling new construction as a buyer's agent. If you have any tips or tricks, we'd love to hear from you guys. All right, guys, you can find us everywhere on social. We would love to hear from you. If you are a listing agent for a builder or if you're constantly selling new construction, we would love to hear your stories and answer any questions that you might have. And we will catch you next time on Realestatable.